Lyra prided herself on control. Among her kind, she was known as a weaver, one who could brush the edges of consciousness without disturbing its core. Minds to her were like star charts, layered, patterned, predictable if you respected their structure. She had spent decades learning restraint, learning where not to look. Humans, however, were a special case. Too loud, too fragmented. Their thoughts collided with memories, instincts, fears, and desires all at once, forming chaotic storms that could overwhelm even a trained telepath. That was why the Interstellar Accord forbade unsolicited mental contact with them. One slip could shatter a psyche, or expose truths never meant to be seen. Lyra had never slipped before. The station cycle had been long. Negotiations with the Karoom delegates dragged on endlessly, each word weighed, each silence a test. By the time she left the council chamber, her temples throbbed faintly, a rare sign of fatigue. She lowered her mental shields slightly, not enough to be dangerous, just enough to breathe. The corridor outside was dim, illuminated by pulsing strips of white-blue light embedded in the walls. Distant machinery hummed, a constant reminder that vacuum waited just beyond the alloy skin of the station. Then the lights flickered. A sharp alarm chirped once, then cut off. Lyra stopped, instinctively reaching outward with her senses to assess the disturbance. Power fluctuation, minor, nothing. She turned the corner and collided with someone solid. The impact knocked the air from her lungs. She stumbled, balance faltering. Hands caught her arms, strong, steady, warm. "Hey, careful," a male voice said quickly, human, calm but alert. "I've got you." The contact was brief, but it was enough. In that fraction of a second, her lowered shields brushed against an unguarded human mind, and the door flew open. The corridor vanished. Lyra gasped as her consciousness was yanked forward, plunging into a mental landscape that was nothing like the ordered halls of her own people. This mind was vast, layered with overlapping awareness. Trained discipline wrapped around constant vigilance. The first sensation was motion. Running, boots pounding against metal decking, red emergency lights flashing, the taste of recycled air sharp in the lungs. She felt his pulse, controlled but elevated, the measured breathing of someone trained to stay calm in crisis. A memory snapped into focus. She saw herself, recognized herself from his eyes. Weeks earlier, in Docking Bay 7, she had been studying a cargo manifest, unaware of the subtle shift in the air. From his vantage point, the shadows near a maintenance corridor moved wrong. Too deliberate. 3 heat signatures where there should have been none. Possible hostile surveillance, his mind noted automatically. He hadn't reached for his weapon. That would have drawn attention. Instead, he stepped forward, pretending to inspect a console, placing his body between Lyra and the corridor. She remembered that moment now, the way a random guard had suddenly been in the way, mildly irritating her. She had thought nothing of it. But in his mind, tension coiled tight as wire. "If they move, I intercept. If they fire, I shield." Another memory surged, crashing over the first. Night cycle, her assigned quarters. The corridor outside her door was quiet, lights dimmed to half. A security panel blinked amber, unauthorized access attempt. His jaw clenched as he disabled the override manually, fingers moving with practiced speed. Too close, he thought. Someone knows where she is. He stayed there for hours. Didn't sit, didn't rest. Every passing footstep triggered an analysis. Threat or civilian, armed or not, intent hostile or benign. His body ached, fatigue tugged at him, but he didn't leave. She doesn't even know. The thought surfaced, oddly gentle. Good, she shouldn't have to. Lyra's breath came shallow as more fragments poured in. A briefing room. Superiors discussing political leverage, asset risk, acceptable losses. Her name spoken clinically. "Known essential personnel," someone had said. His reaction had been immediate, visceral, a spike of anger tightly leashed. "They don't see her. They don't know what she carries. If they use her as bait..." He cut the thought short, already planning alternatives. False reports, adjusted patrol routes. Silent warnings passed through unofficial channels, all to keep danger away from her. And beneath it all, constant, unyielding, was fear. Not fear of punishment, not fear of death, fear of failure. "If I miss something," his mind whispered in a quiet, unguarded moment, "she won't get a second chance." The weight of it crushed her, Lyra tried to pull back, but the connection deepened instead, dragging her into the emotional undercurrent he never allowed to surface. Humans hid their feelings behind walls of habit and humor, but this one had buried his so deep that even he rarely acknowledged them. Respect, admiration, concern, and something dangerously close to devotion. Her own heart hammered as the realization struck her like a physical blow. All this time she had assumed indifference. She had misread his silence as detachment, his distance as disinterest. But silence was his discipline. Distance was his shield. The corridor slammed back into existence as she tore herself free, staggering backward. Her hand slipped from his grasp as if burned. The station lights steadied. The alarms remained distant, unresolved. The human stood in front of her, brows drawn together, eyes searching her face. "Hey," he said again, softer now. "You look like you're about to pass out. Should I call medical?" His voice was the same voice she had just heard in moments of quiet resolve and unspoken fear. Ordinary, human. She couldn't reconcile it. Lyra pressed a hand to her chest, steadying herself. Her species did not blush, but if they did, she would have been glowing. "I know," she managed. "I'm fine." A lie, a poor one. His gaze sharpened, instinctively assessing. "You sure? That bump wasn't that hard." It wasn't the collision, she thought weakly. It was you. She met his eyes, and for the first time, she truly saw him, not as a background presence, not as a uniform in a sea of uniforms, but as a singular mind carrying an impossible burden in silence. "You should be more careful," he said, offering a small, reassuring smile. "This station's full of sharp corners." If only he knew how sharp he was. Lyra nodded stiffly and stepped back, increasing the distance between them before she lost control again. Every instinct screamed to rebuild her mental barriers, to retreat into safety. But it was too late for ignorance. As she turned and walked away, her thoughts spiraled. She had entered his mind by accident. And in doing so, she had discovered a truth more dangerous than any hostile force stalking the station. Someone had chosen her, without permission, without recognition, without reward. And that knowledge changed everything. Lyra did not avoid him because she feared what he might do. She avoided him because she feared what she might do. For 3 full station cycles, she altered her routes, delayed meetings, and relied on secondary corridors she normally ignored. Her aides noticed the change immediately. Weavers were creatures of precision, not evasion, but she dismissed their concerns with clipped explanations about efficiency and rest. In truth, her mind was anything but orderly. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw his thoughts as clearly as her own reflection. The way his awareness constantly mapped danger, the silent recalculations, the instinctive way his body always placed itself between her and uncertainty. The memories clung to her, unbidden, vivid as if they were her own. This was why telepaths did not read human minds. Not because humans were weak, but because they were intense. On the 4th cycle, she stopped running. The decision came quietly, without ceremony, during a moment of stillness in her quarters. The stars outside her viewport drifted slowly, distant and indifferent. She realized then that avoidance was a luxury she could not afford. The connection, however accidental, had already been made. To leave it unresolved would be its own kind of cruelty. She knew where to find him. The observation deck on the station's outer ring was unofficial territory, too quiet for most crew, too exposed for casual loitering. He took his breaks there during low traffic hours, when the stars were brightest and the station's internal noise faded into a distant hum. When the doors slid open, she felt his presence before she saw him. He stood with his back to her, hands clasped behind him, dark uniform softened by the blue glow of starlight. His posture was relaxed, but his awareness was not. It never was. She could almost feel the quiet vigilance radiating from him, like gravity. "I figured you'd come eventually," he said without turning. Her steps faltered. "You sensed me?" He huffed a quiet laugh. "No, you're just not as subtle as you think." She approached slowly, stopping a respectful distance away. The vast window stretched before them, revealing a sea of stars scattered across the black. For a moment, neither spoke. "After the corridor incident," he continued, voice low, "you changed your routines, avoided shared spaces. That's not random behavior." She folded her hands together, a gesture of composure ingrained since childhood. "You are observant." It's my job. And so is keeping secrets, she thought. She drew in a breath she didn't need, steadying herself. I owe you an explanation. He turned then, fully facing her. His expression was open but cautious, like someone standing on uncertain ground. I didn't intend to enter your mind, she said. My shields were lowered. The collision created a breach. His eyes flickered, not with fear but with understanding. So you saw something? Yes. He waited, patient, braced. Everything, Lyra said softly. Every instance where you placed yourself between me and harm. Every unauthorized action taken on my behalf. Every risk you assumed without my knowledge. The silence that followed was heavy, but not hostile. Finally, he exhaled, shoulders loosening slightly. I wondered when, or if, you'd put it together. You knew I might discover it. I knew you could, he corrected. Didn't know if you ever would. Why didn't you stop? She asked. Why continue once you realized the risk? His gaze drifted back to the stars. Because stopping would have meant pretending you didn't matter. The simplicity of it struck her harder than any revelation she had taken from his mind. I was assigned to observe you, he went on. At first it was just protocol, a human presence attached to a high-value non-human asset. But then I started noticing things, how often people underestimated you, how often your safety was discussed like a variable instead of a certainty. His jaw tightened. I didn't like that. Lyra's voice wavered despite her control. You altered reports. Yes. You disobeyed orders. Yes. You endangered yourself. He met her eyes, repeatedly. Why? She asked again, the word barely audible. He considered her for a long moment, as if weighing the cost of honesty. Then he nodded once, deciding. Because someone had to choose you, he said. And because you never asked for the enemies your position attracts. Emotion stirred within her, sharp, unfamiliar, almost painful. Her kind valued transparency of thought, yet here was a human who had carried his truth in silence, shielding her without expectation. She stepped closer. For my people, she said slowly, protection is a function of hierarchy. Duty flows downward. Care is regulated. He smiled faintly. Humans aren't great at regulation. I have noticed. She hesitated only a moment before doing something unprecedented. She lowered her mental barriers. Not the catastrophic collapse of the corridor incident, but a deliberate opening. A controlled bridge. Just enough. He stiffened slightly, sensing the shift, but he didn't pull away. Through the thin connection, she let him feel what she felt. The shock of discovery, the weight of gratitude, the quiet awe at his resolve. She kept her thoughts carefully arranged, respectful of his autonomy. He swallowed, breath catching as the echo reached him. So that's what it's like, he murmured. To be seen. Yes, she replied, and it is as overwhelming. The connection lasted only seconds, but when she withdrew, something had irrevocably changed between them. He looked at her differently now, not guarded, not distant. Present. I never meant to cross a line, he said. If knowing all this makes you uncomfortable, I'll request reassignment. The thought of his absence struck her with unexpected force. No, she said immediately. Then, more gently, I do not wish you to leave. He searched her face. Then what do you want? She turned toward the stars, mirroring his stance from earlier. Understanding, she said, and perhaps trust. A slow smile spread across his face, real and unguarded. I can do that. They stood together in silence, watching distant suns burn in quiet defiance of the dark. For the first time since the accident, Lyra felt balanced. She had entered his mind and discovered protection. Now, standing beside him, she realized something even more profound. Protection, when freely given, was not a chain. It was a bond, and for the first time in her long existence, she chose to accept it.